Welcome to Jail Life with Daniel. I'm your host, Rabbi Daniel Levine. Today, we're going to discuss all things election. We're going to debrief everything for you. I brought my friend ChayaLeah, who we were going to anyway talk for an hour on the phone about the election and all things. So figured, let's just do a podcast. ChayaLeah is the director of Hillel at Long Beach and runs her own podcast called Ask a Jew. ChayaLeah, welcome.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. Thank you for having me. And it's true, I would have talked to you for an hour anyway today. So why not let other people listen as long as we don't lose our jobs?
Exactly. I would say
What?
50-50 on that. And let's start with the us losing our jobs. Neither of us voted for Trump. Let's just get that out there
Yes,
at the
correct.
outset. But I would say we both are very interesting because compared to most of our friends, we actually have communities that are very split 50-50 of Trump and Harris
Yes,
voters. I think,
yes.
if you go more in the Orthodox community or in the Persian community, it seems like everybody is voting for Trump and they haven't met any crazy person voting for Harris in this election. And then if you go in the liberal Jewish community, you talk to everybody and voting for Trump is considered heresy in the liberal Jewish community. And I think that's really healthy. I mean, that's the first thing that I wanted to start off with. I think there are a lot of people that are freaking out and that are shocked and that are saying, who are these people, these 71 million people voting for Trump? um,
Yeah,
and it just seems like I can't even imagine not having a social sphere that is
right.
split on politics and religion. So I don't know. It always confuses me that most Americans are in this situation where they only talk to people that agree with them.
Yeah, I mean, it's been my social media has been hilarious over the last few weeks leading up to the election. As my like interactions in real life, because I really do live in two worlds, and I would say that my Orthodox world and sort of the very like right-wing Zionist world that I live in, I mean, have been praying for Trump, working for Trump, really kind of Trumpy in that way. And then the space I work in, my professional world, and many of my friends and many of the other people that I live around, think Trump is the second coming of Hitler and are appalled that anybody could even consider. And many of them are Zionists too, which is interesting, right? So there's even the Zionist community felt very split over this election. Um, it's yeah, I feel bad for people who don't know anyone in the other on the other side. It's impossible to understand the country we live in, even the world we live in, if you don't know people who voted for the other one. You just can't.
Yeah, 100%. And even
Possible.
being in two different media, I mean, not just with people. I mean, I feel like
Yeah.
both of us, it's interesting. I am a voracious reader of the New York Times and CNN and the
Mhm.
Atlantic and sort of liberal media, but I also listen to like all the, a lot of the oddball podcasts, and it's just two different worlds. I mean, I think,
Yeah.
people don't realize. I was talking to a friend earlier who was sort of, I can't believe, who are these people voting for Trump? And I made some comment. I was trying to, of course, me and you are both great political pundits. We have all the answers. We'll
Yeah.
elucidate it over the next 30 minutes. And I made some comment, and I was like, it's crazy, but like Kamala Harris probably should have gone on Joe Rogan. And they're like, why? What would that have done? And I was thinking, and I looked it up earlier today. The episode that he did with Trump got 100 million views.
I mean, it's outrageous. Outrageous. That was free advertising for him. She spent $1 billion and lost. He went on Joe Rogan. He didn't spend a penny, and look what he got out of that. I mean, it was a game changer. I
Yeah,
think personally, people don't look. I'm for a woman my age, I'm probably more aware of that sphere of media than most, because I somehow fell into like the kind of heterodox, libertarian, weirdo journalist media world. And so I've been listening to people like Joe Rogan and all the others, that he went on, and things like All In. Do you listen to the All In podcast? Are you
no, I've heard
Yeah.
of it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like, I listened to the All In podcast or whatever, all the things that Trump was doing, and millions and millions and millions of people listen. And it's interesting, and you don't have to like them. You don't have to like every guest, but you learn something about them every single time. A 3-hour conversation with Joe Rogan is going to tell me a lot more than a 20-minute 60 minute segment that's edited and boring and, planned beforehand or whatever.
For sure.
So he was smart about that.
Yeah, totally. And let's get into the data because I was, looking at all these charts. Obviously Trump won with guys, right? So guys under 30 broke for Trump over 50%. But even girls or females under 30 broke for Trump more than they did 4 years ago.
That's crazy.
And my theory, I mean, this isn't, mine, this is, some political pundits' theory. which I totally buy because I felt a little bit of the the taiva, the urge, to dabble in considering voting for Trump. I did not, by the way.
Right.
But for me, I totally get why it was more attractive than the last couple of elections. Republicans have established themselves as the anti-establishment party.
Right.
I
I
mean,
know.
for
Yeah.
years, I can imagine, 20 or 30 years ago, if you didn't like the establishment, you were against the media and the
Mhm.
corporations and the government, and like you wanted to stick it to the man, you're a liberal. And
Yeah.
all of a sudden now there's a whole generation of people that are growing up and everything they know is liberal, right? The
Yeah.
media they read is liberal. That
They're
probably,
teachers.
yeah,
Yeah.
their teachers in school are liberal. The corporation that they work for, if they're in some
Yeah.
tech industry or some business industry is, has gone all in on DEI. And so now it's actually considered the rebellious, thing to, the countercultural
It's
thing to do to vote
interesting. Yeah.
Republican. And I think we're going to see a lot more young people, kind of hop on this bandwagon. Now, obviously, there's real policy differences that I think, are important to talk about versus,
Yeah.
culture. But of course, a lot of people don't vote on, taxes versus
Yeah.
tariffs or on
Well,
abortion or all these things.
especially young people. I don't think
Exactly.
they're not voting on capital gains taxes or any of that kind of stuff. They're voting on vibes and they're voting on culture stuff and yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's tr- I said, in Hebrew we say Trias Hamesem, rising from the dead. If you would have told me 2 years ago that Trump was going to be the president again, I'd say you're nuts. I mean, there was no chance. So I just feel like the last few years, telling people, I, and I'm not the first one to say this, so I don't want to take credit for it. But if you constantly tell boys and men that they're horrible and misogynist and disgusting, why would they want to vote for you? If you're always telling white people that they're racist and horrible and xenophobic, why would they want to vote for, like, they won't be in your camp. You can't alienate every group of people and then wonder why they're voting for Donald Trump. So I think part of what the Democrats are going to have to do over the next few years is reconsider how they talk about these large groups of people that like shouldn't be talked about in that way. I mean, there's bad people in every group, every single group.
Yeah.
I mean,
Well,
by
even
the
I mean,
way,
even minority groups, right?
yeah,
Like
that's the thing.
they
Yeah,
all vote for Trump also.
I
So it's
know.
not like Trump,
I know.
doubled his white man vote. I mean,
Yeah.
he did a little bit better, but like
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
black community, okay, 13% is not huge. The Latino community, 45%. I mean, these are
Yeah.
big numbers,
Yeah.
but even the last week of the election, there was more media time on complaining about what's his name, Tony Hinchcliffe's, the comedian at Madison
Yeah.
Square Garden. Okay, not the jokes I would make, but like it's a
Right.
stand-up comedian, right? Like,
Right.
have you ever gone to comedy? And I think people just see Democrats as like, oh, you're just like the establishment, bureaucratic,
Yeah.
woke, you're the person who's gonna get me in trouble and like wipe me
Patronizing.
up. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
patronizing,
Patronizing.
moralizing. And
Yeah.
and it's frustrating because again, as somebody who I think Trump is absolutely abhorrent, I think as a
Right.
person, he
Right.
represents probably the
Yeah.
worst in all of us, and he's narcissistic, he's a crazy person. I don't really trust him on policy. We'll get to policy in a little bit. I'm very afraid for the Middle East, even
Yeah.
while some part of me is a little bit cautiously optimistic. We'll get to that in like 10 minutes. But it just seems like even now you see in a lot of liberal and progressive bubbles, they're sort of doubling down in the patronism. So like, oh,
Yeah.
I guess now 60% of the country is hopelessly sexist and racist. And it's like, you guys are
Yeah.
missing the point. I mean, you know,
Well, even worse, I get really upset when they talk about the uneducated, like the way they divide the country into college educated and non-college educated. Like, shut up. You don't know the experience of my housekeeper, right? My housekeeper, who I love dearly and worked for me for 15 years and is an amazing person, has 5 sons. I have 4 sons. Like, we have so many things in common in that way. Like, she's not running for a progressive agenda. It doesn't speak to her at all. She's a religious Christian. She cares very much about religious, kind of morals. So you can say to yourself, well, why would she vote for someone like Trump then? Because he's definitely not some kind of religious figure. But you know what bothered her? It bothered her the things that her kids were being taught in school. It bothered her the cultural stuff that was being shoved down her throat. And so when I asked her why she was voting for Trump, I mean, those were the reasons she gave. Like, literally, it was all culture war stuff. And I was pretty surprised when I found out. But you know what? Turns out a lot of people in that community care about that stuff. And so we have to like think about that in a way that is more realistic, at least. I mean, we have to. I don't know how I don't know how the Democratic Party can walk away from this election and not take a deep look into policy, messaging, the people we're running. I mean, all of those things. It's all needs to be
Well, you also get like
looked
conflicting
at.
theories. So of course, okay, so Jews, as of exit polling, 45% of Jews in Pennsylvania voted for Trump
Right.
compared to 55 for Harris. By
That's
historic
crazy.
numbers, that is the
That's
most percentage of
crazy.
Jews voting Republican
That's
probably since the 1920s. I mean, since as far back as I can remember.
yeah.
So there is this narrative that we can spin that it's because the Democrats weren't willing to call out the sort of crazies on the far left, the pro Hamas people. You're also seeing the opposite narrative, right? So Peter Beinart wrote an op ed for the New York
Oh,
Times that the
yeah.
reason why the Democrats lost was because they weren't harsh enough on Gaza. So,
Yes.
they sort of are getting it from both sides. But I think you're totally right. I think to take away from this election that the reason why Democrats lost was because they weren't sufficiently left wing
I
just
know.
seems a little crazy. I don't know. I kind of see the point. And again, maybe if they had a more Bernie Sanders populist economic policy,
Right. Right.
okay, maybe, but
Right.
definitely not cultural progressivism because that's just
No.
repudiated. And again, I think it's because white progressives, the people of color they meet are tokens, meaning like they're not
Right.
actually, people that think they understand the experiences of the Latino community are not meeting people like your housekeeper. They're
Right.
meeting
Right.
the top, whatever
Yeah.
percent
Yeah.
that are
Yeah.
going to these elite schools that have been probably told through high school and through DEI programs and through now, whatever they're talking about on campus that, you are this group, you're Latinx, these are your experiences. And then
Yeah.
you talk to your average person and they're like, no, this isn't at all who we are or anything like that.
Yeah. I do want to address one thing. So I didn't vote for Trump, but I did not vote for Harris either. And I want to address why I made that decision because I had a hard time thinking about it and I wasn't sure. I know I'll get a lot of I'm gonna get a lot of comments on this, but that's okay. Um, I could not vote for this administration because I'm very angry at them about how they've dealt with campus anti-Semitism over the last year plus since October 7th. And I'm specifically upset that over this entire year, the president and vice president did not use their sphere of influence to stop this crap that's going on with Jewish students all over the country. And I can't reward them for it. And I couldn't, I just couldn't with my own conscience walk into the ballot box or whatever, the ballot booth, whatever it was that I stood in and selected the president and reward Kamala Harris for that when she, in my opinion, did not do anything to stop what's going on campus. I can't forgive them. And I don't know why the Jewish community didn't see that more. Now, why didn't I vote for Trump? I mean, where should I start? I'm very hopeful that he's going to be good for Israel. I really, really am. I'm very hopeful. I just he as a person I can't. I couldn't do it. I don't know. I could not do it. I didn't vote for him the last 2 times, and I just couldn't do it this time either. There's something about him that is so upsetting. I hate the way he talks about people. I hate the way he belittles people and makes fun of them. I know it's funny and whatever, and I laugh and I do the same thing probably, but he's a president of this country, and I feel like it's just I hate that my boys think it's funny, that the president mocks people. Like it really bothers me. It's such bad midos, as we say. Like it's such bad characteristics of a person. So I couldn't do it. I just couldn't do it, even though I know most of my community did, and that's fine. And I don't judge them, and I'm not judging anyone. Everyone votes in their own self-interest, and I get that. But I'm really looking forward to 4 years from now where we can have maybe 2 boring, regular candidates, one who's just like a regular Democrat and one who's a regular Republican, and we can just make that kind of choice because this is tearing it really is tearing us apart. I feel like the last 10 years has just been the Trumpiness is just it's so bad for us in that sense, makes everyone
Totally.
crazy.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I also very much, I think, sympathize with the frustration with just Democrats in general. I mean, again, two
Yeah.
years ago, if you told me I would consider voting Republican for Congress, I would have
Yeah.
laughed at you. I mean, I literally got my ballot in 2022. This is right after the repeal of Roe.
Yeah.
I've voted Democrat my whole life. I
Yeah.
literally didn't even read the names. It was like Democrat, Democrat,
Right.
I
Right.
just filled out, D's all the
Right.
way down, whatever. This election, using this podcast, I reached out to both the Republican and Democrat. They actually still haven't counted the votes yet. It's still
Oh, it's crazy.
they're within 400 votes of each other. So I've
Are
been
you
joking to a
serious?
lot of my friends. I think this podcast might determine the
Yeah.
future of Congress. So, you know,
That's so funny. That's
but
so funny.
yeah, I mean, the Republican guy has a whole host of views I don't agree with. He was on my last episode of the podcast. So,
Yeah.
we disagree on abortion, we disagree on a whole host of social
Right.
issues, but he has a big sign in his office, I think, pro-Israel, I forgot the exact sign, free the
Right.
hostages, whatever. He's been unequivocally denouncing anti-Semitism that's happening on college campuses. Now, again, it's, kind of a cheap win for Republicans also, because it's obviously, left-wing anti-Semitism there. But the reticence of Democrats is
Yeah.
just crazy. I mean, they're afraid to go on record saying, we denounce anti-Semitism without the whole slew of and
Yeah.
Islamophobia
And
and hate
other
in all
stuff.
forms. And it's like,
Yeah.
this is the all lives matter that people got
Yeah.
so upset with. And so I mean, I'm certainly not a progressive anymore. I mean, I think, there was maybe a couple months after Black Lives Matter where, I hopped on the bandwagon, and where I was willing to test the theory that doubling down on race is going to be helpful. I have since been convinced it's just terrible for everybody. I mean, it's terrible for Jews, of course, but I think it's also terrible for all these other minority communities
Yeah.
also, because
Yeah.
what's made America so great in the last 60, 70 years. And, that's really when, the post World War II era, when everyone was equal, post, post Jim Crow, obviously post women's suffrage, was liberalism, right? Like that's the thing that we have that no other country does. The fact that everybody, you as a woman, me as a man, us as Jews, someone who's African American, someone who's Latino, like our Constitution protects
Yeah.
individuals and we have
Protects us. Right.
individual liberties. And that's the thing that's gonna, I think keep us going. And so when you start to go backwards in time and say, actually, let's talk about people as like men and women and, Jews and not Jews and blacks and not, it's like, I
Right.
get how that's interesting for maybe like polling data, but in
Yeah.
terms of like policy around that, it just seems like obviously that's not the right direction. So
Yeah. Did you read the book Tablets Shattered by Joshua Leifer?
it's funny, I literally have it on my desk next to
Oh,
me.
okay.
It's a little bit out of reach. A friend of mine just
Okay.
got it for me.
Okay, good.
I've read the introduction. Why?
Okay. When you're done, I'd like to maybe we'll do another podcast episode about the book because I was very angry reading the book. It really bothers me, many parts of it, but some of the things he says are really true and really painful about the American Jewish community and the way we think about things. And he talks a lot about like liberalism as a replacement for, you know, any other like
For
religion
Judaism.
that, yeah, for Judaism or any religious feelings that people had. And I think a lot of Jews are feeling that sort of rejection from progressives and the left, and it's hard. It's really hard, and the Orthodox, I think not the modern Orthodox community so much, but I think the mainstream and ultra Orthodox communities have just always kept themselves away from that, right? And never looked at voting as like I don't know, it didn't signal anything about their morality or, the way they think about the world other than this is the best person for what we need right now. It's a
Mhm.
means
It's
to
a
an
lot more like
end.
realpolitik. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a means to an end, and that's
But
what it
this is
is.
also why I'm convinced that Orthodox Jews, and I say this as somebody who like specifically left the Orthodox community because of dogmatism. So like I think I
Yeah.
have credentials to say this. I'm a lot more comfortable talking politics with Orthodox Jews when I
Correct.
disagree than liberal Jews, because
Yes.
I can
Yes.
talk to a good friend of mine who voted for Trump and is like, Trump all the way down. He
Yeah.
knows I don't vote for Trump, and we can sit down and have a great debate for an hour and
Right.
even yell at each other. And then at
Right.
the end, we continue with our Shabbat dinner, and like
Right.
the next day, we like it's like nothing happened. But on the other side, it's impossible. Like
Yeah.
I am not the Trump is Hitler camp. I don't think you're the Trump is Hitler camp. And
No.
I've been talking to people that think that, all is lost and the world is ending and, we're starting to
Yeah.
sit Shiva now. And like, I constantly engage with people by,
Right.
push and
Right.
pull and whatever. I think that's, normal. That's both Judaism and liberalism. So
Right.
I'll
Right.
combine them there.
Right.
But they're just not able to do it.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
I don't, yeah.
I think the other thing is that for a lot of people, politics, and especially liberal Jews, I think politics replaced religion in many ways. And so when you're electing the leader or your party, you're making a moral judgment on like who you are as a person by the person you're selecting. But I think Orthodox Jews have they get their morals and their sort of moral leadership within their communities from rabbis and other community leaders. And so elected officials just don't play that kind of role for them. And so it's a very different attitude about who you're voting for. That's why people will say to me, I don't understand how the Orthodox community could elect someone who cheated on his wife. I mean, like, no, who cares? Like, that's Donald Trump is not going to be the moral compass of the
Yeah.
yeshivas in Brooklyn.
Well,
He's just not.
it's like the great joke in the beginning of Fiddler on the Roof, right? They're like doing the
Yeah,
tradition dance, and then they turn to the rabbi, like,
exactly.
rabbis are a blessing for the czar. And he's like, of course,
Yes,
I
exactly.
bless that God keep the czar far away from us. Like that's kind of
That's right.
that's the traditional Jewish political view, which
Yeah,
is we
yeah,
want to deal with politics as least as possible. And when
that's
it comes up, whoever's going to be better for us in this narrow case. I mean, that's why I think, and this is again, anybody who is like Harris voter plus Trump equals fascism, how dare anybody consider it is probably not going to like this podcast, but it's probably most
yeah,
important they listen to this because I think both of us are very interesting because neither of us voted for Trump, but we're trying to give, diagnoses here. From some perspective, I was thinking about this a couple months ago. All of the reasons why I voted Democrat for the last 3 elections don't actually benefit me. It was a values-based vote.
hmm
Like
right,
being totally bluntly honest
right.
in terms of
You're
Republican
not getting an
policy,
abortion,
tougher on, I'm not getting an abortion, but tougher on crime,
right?
lower taxes. I mean, the stock market's up like 4 or 5%,
Yeah,
things
yeah,
that will really help me.
yeah,
But the last couple of elections, it's basically been, okay, I'm willing to put aside my best self-interest in terms of these values, liberal
right,
values like freedom of choice, LGBTQ, the whole, all of the things. And that was a decision that I was happy to make, and still, depending on the election, I'm happy to make. But all of a sudden, post October 7th, none of these same groups came to bat for the Jewish community.
right.
So all of a sudden, like, okay, in 2024, you're going to tell me I should now vote to protect X community against my self-interest of security and finances and potentially Israel, which is probably the issue we both care about, the most
Yeah,
because I care about this value, which I do care about the value, but that value is then applied to a community who actually this past year was like sticking the knife in deeper with the
right.
proliferation of anti-Semitism and not standing with the Jewish community at all. That's a pretty hard thing to convince a lot of, people that are in the
It,
Jewish community. And so this is why, I mean, okay, forget Trump because he's a uniquely polarizing figure. In terms of the Congress races, I mean, I talked to a lot of Jews, liberals that voted Republican in a whole
Republican.
variety of Congress and Senate. That's the other big story, of course. The Senate flipped by like what 5 seats or something like that to
Yeah.
Republicans. So,
But think about the issue that you and I deal with on campus. Which party? And I cannot believe I'm saying this because everybody, I mean, I'm a Democrat. I've voted Democrat. I mean, I've changed a lot in the last few
I
years. I've
feel like we're
definitely
doing the
become
political equivalent of like
I
some
know
of
we're
my best
clearing
friends
our
are
throats.
Jewish.
I know we're
It's
clearing
like
our
it's
throats. I
like
hate it, but I feel
it's
like I
like
have to. I
don't
know.
worry. As
I
as
know.
somebody who at one
I
time
know.
had a Jewish friend, like as somebody
Yeah.
who voted for Harris.
No, like I've definitely become much more centrist and moderate, but I, I mean, if you look at the two parties, which party made it their business to center the Jewish community this year? I mean, honestly, when it came to, the congressional hearings, when it came to passing bills and laws or whatever it was that were going to benefit the Jewish community, the Republicans stood up for us. And I hate saying that because I know people are going to get mad at me and say, "Oh, but they only care because they want Jesus to come back and whatever." I'm going to get that whole story. Well, you know what? If that's why, I guess I'll take it. I mean, someone should protect us at least. I mean, who's protecting us? I mean, I know we have to protect ourselves, and I'm a big believer in that. But it's nice when a group of people acknowledge what's going on. Our own Jewish Speaker of the House, or no, what was he? Senate Majority Leader.
Senate
Sorry,
Majority, Chuck
Chuck
Schumer.
Schumer, the Senate Majority Leader, a Jew, threw the Jewish kids at Columbia under the bus.
Can you explain
Literally.
for listeners, just in case they're not
He,
scrolling Twitter to the same extent me
I
and you are?
I know. Well, there's a whole story that broke that Chuck Schumer basically told the administration of Columbia to kind of just sit on their hands and do nothing and ignore what's going on because it's a Republican issue. And he didn't want it to come to Congress and he didn't want to deal with it and he wasn't going to help them and whatever. And he told them to downplay what the Jewish students were experiencing there. How do we forgive that? How do we as a community forgive that? I can't. I'm not ready to. And Chuck Schumer is going to have, and guess what? He's out of his job, like as Speaker of the as Majority Leader of the Senate. I don't know why I keep saying Speaker of the House, but as Senate Majority Leader, he's out, and I'm not sad. I hate to say it. I'm really not sad. He doesn't deserve
Yeah.
it.
No,
So I
I
don't
think you're
know.
totally right. No, I
It's
mean,
complicated.
it is complicated. There's
Um,
a couple other things that I wanted to throw out there. One, I think there is going to be this question in Jewish community about Josh Shapiro, just for listeners' background.
yeah.
Josh Shapiro
Yeah.
was the, governor of, right? He's a governor.
Yeah,
Am I
he's the
getting that
governor
wrong?
of Pennsylvania.
Governor of
Yeah.
Pennsylvania, right? Pennsylvania is obviously the key to
Swing.
victory. Jewish guy, relatively pro-Israel. I won't even say super pro-Israel, but like pro-Israel.
He's good.
Um,
Yeah, I would trust it. I
yeah,
trust him.
yeah.
Yeah.
And Kamala,
Efficiently pro-Israel, as I like to say.
yeah, and Harris didn't pick him to
Yeah.
the point where some people think it was specifically because she was trying to court the, anti-Israel vote, which of course, the Arabs broke for Trump also,
I
which we'll
mean,
talk about in a couple
hilarious.
minutes.
Yeah.
But again, that's just another sort of like nail in the coffin. I don't know, for me. Like, okay, I didn't
Yeah.
vote for Trump, but I can't see myself voting Democrat in another future election unless, they radically change things. Because, okay, in 4 years from now, what if it's Marco Rubio or Nikki Haley versus,
Yeah.
generic Democrat? Like, who's not going to pick the Republican? I mean, at least, for
I
people
know.
who are deeply attuned to anti-Semitism and Israel. And,
Israel.
and I say this, and a lot of liberal Jews are going to be in shock, but I will just say, and I will, challenge people's privilege. I'll use privilege with saying two things. One, you're Orthodox. I obviously present as Orthodox because I'm a nerdy guy with kippah. Um, I think we're just a lot more attuned to anti-Semitism than
Oh
people who
yeah,
don't present as Jewish.
that's
Like,
right.
you know, I've been wearing a kippah my whole life out everywhere.
Yeah.
I'm not surprised by the amount of anti-Semitism. I'm surprised by, the current morphing and the fact that the whole
Correct.
DEI apparatus went with it. But like, I think
Yeah.
for us, we've always been a little bit more, sanguine,
2 weeks ago, my
clear-eyed
kids were
about.
bowling. No, 2 weeks ago, my boys were bowling, and a group of kids walked by them and started screaming "Free Palestine" at them. And my kids didn't even stop. They continued bowling. And when they came home, they told me the story. And I was like, "What? You didn't call me?" Like, it didn't even, because they walk around visibly as Jews all the time, and it happens a lot. And it's
Oh
not,
yeah, I said last year I still get about 1 to 2 free Palestines thrown at me a week,
yeah, yeah,
and people are shocked, and
right,
and it's like okay, so
right,
all of these
right.
other so and that's where you kind of get convinced, like okay, I'll vote for the congressman who's willing to call that out because
Yeah,
that actually affects my
exactly.
life a lot more. Like
That's
I
right.
don't want my do I want my future kid, I don't know. So I
I
think
have a
that's
theory about the Josh Shapiro thing, though. Sorry to interrupt you for a
oh yeah,
second, but
go for it.
I would not
This
be
is
surprised.
why I brought you on because when I do these
Yeah.
solo podcasts, they're actually it's funny because some of those are like the best listened to, but I
Yeah.
realized at a certain point once I stop recording, I'm like get up and I'm like drenched in sweat and I'm like I've just been ranting for 45 minutes. Like what the hell am I doing?
That's
So
brave though. It's
you're at
brave to
least here to
do.
stop me, so that's
Yeah.
good.
I have a theory. I think Josh Shapiro actually is really smart and probably did not want the job, did not want to run with her. And I wouldn't be surprised if he let them know underneath, like behind the scenes, because he could run for president on his own probably in a few years. And why would he probably saw the writing on the wall that this was going to be a really complicated, tough race, and it has a lot of baggage. It has all the Biden baggage, it has Kamala Harris baggage. Like, why would he want to attach himself to that? Now he can, in 4 year, in 3.5 years, he can come onto the scene as a real contender, I think, for president. So I don't know. No one told, I don't work for him. I don't know, but I would not be surprised if that was his calculation at least. So
Interesting.
I don't
I
know.
think that could be right. I think still when it's the time when you get the call, like assuming you want to move up, which all
Yeah.
politicians do,
Yeah.
like I
I mean,
think
he's
it'd
the
be
governor of
so
a
hard.
huge state. I don't know. It's
Yeah,
it's
it's
it's a,
interesting.
it's interesting. Tim Walz was never, he's not going anywhere. That guy's not running for president, like that
Yeah,
was the
yeah, he's
best
not going to run for
that was
president.
the best he could have done for himself probably. Well, it will be, somebody made a joke I saw about her, but I think it more is more relevant to him that, like, in 5 years or in 15 years, it's gonna be like a Jeopardy question. Like, who was the vice president,
That's so funny.
running mate for in 2024? And people are gonna be like, who was it?
That's so funny. Okay, I do think, and I've been trying to think about this in my head because it's one of those things where I actually get really frustrated when people use this as the primary reason, but I do think it played a role, and that's sexism in terms of the way
Oh,
the election.
interesting.
And so I'm curious, I'll go identity politics for a minute. As a
Sure.
woman, um, no, I'm curious. I mean, what percent did you think that played in
No,
the vote?
I actually don't think. I mean, if anything, I mean, I just don't see it. I know people are gonna go crazy at me, but I just don't see it. I don't think people walk to the election and say, I can't vote for a woman. I don't see it. I
The argument would be,
if
let me play.
Condoleezza Rice was running, I think she would win. Like, I don't think it would even be an issue.
Well, I
I
think,
just
okay,
don't.
here's the devil's advocate here. It's not an explicit thing of like, oh, woman bad, but it's more
Right.
like
Implicit
they
bias. Yeah.
give her a little bit less of the benefit of the doubt. And when she kind of meanders on, it's not, oh,
Yeah.
wow, she's sophisticated and thinking about her words. It's like, what is this crazy woman saying? Like, there is
Yeah.
kind of a
I
lot of,
mean,
and again, because I'm a, young man, and so my
yeah.
social media is geared towards young men, and I happen to like things that a lot of young men like sports and,
Yeah,
I
yeah,
don't know, general, normal man stuff. I
yeah,
have been targeted by this sort of like, manosphere of,
yeah,
what's his name, the crazy guy, Andrew Tate, like every
yeah,
couple, times I go on Instagram, and like, that guy's like a crazy,
yeah,
face. And there it is, kind of like explicitly the memes are like,
yeah.
all sexist and everything. And again, none of those people are voting for Harris to begin with, but I wonder like if in the culture that kind of just
I
seeps in
just
the same way, like, you know,
It's so hard to know because I mean, for sure, listen, for sure. I don't know what percentage it is. Is it 5%? Is it 20%? I don't know. You're right. It is for sure some kind of implicit bias against a woman. But to be fair, the two women that we've had run for president so far have been such flawed candidates that it's really hard for me to know if it's because they were women or if they were coming with all this other baggage, like Hillary Clinton, who, by the way, I would vote for Hillary today in a second, right? Like, she's been nothing but incredible about Israel and explaining to young Democrats like what happened during the Clinton years, and same with Bill Clinton, by the way.
yeah,
Like,
Bill
I
Clinton had a
want to
great
give
speech.
them,
I
I
recommend
know
that anybody that didn't
it's
hear that, you should go Google
they've
Bill
been
Clinton Israel.
incredible. Yeah, the Clintons have been incredible when it comes to talking about Israel. But, Hillary came, I talked about Hillary a lot when she was running, and I was very against her running as a candidate because, and I voted for Obama when they ran against each other in primaries. I voted for Obama because I felt that when I was a teenager in the 90s, watching the Clintons and what they were dealing with, and the fact that she rolled over, right, and ignored the way her husband shamed her publicly and embarrassed her, and all the things that she whatever, and she decided, I think, I'm not in her head, but seems to me that she made a deal with the devil because she wanted to have power too. I just didn't respect it, right? And a lot of women felt that way about her. I remember as a teenager feeling like, leave him, what are you doing, like, what, are you serious? Like, you're gonna put up with this guy? Like, and I lost all my respect for her. I respect her more now because I understand a lot more about life now than I did then. But the point is, it's hard for me to judge how many people didn't vote for Hillary because of that, because she was a very flawed candidate. And then with Kamala, it's kind of similar. Like, I don't, she's not a great candidate. Like, forget the woman part. Like, I think there were a lot of things about her that were not great. I mean, she's never really run in a competitive camp, like a
Yeah.
competitive race. And when she did, she barely got any points and had to drop out super early. Like, so I don't know. I mean, give me a woman who's super impressive, who checks all the boxes, and then let's see, put, like, I keep saying Condoleezza Rice. I don't know why
No, but
I'm
the
very
argument
impressed
would
with
be
her, but
the argument wouldn't be that it's impossible for a woman to get elected, but
right. It's a bigger,
they would
higher
have to do
threshold.
better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's
Versus
true.
like,
Listen,
she was a
that's,
flawed candidate, but Trump is like
yeah, he's
a
amazing.
total clown, doofus,
No,
asshole,
I guess
fascist.
it's
Like,
true.
so I
I
think
guess
that's
it's
more,
true.
and again, I don't think people, okay, there are probably 30% of people who just are obsessed with Trump as like a figurehead and, everything like that. Probably
Yeah.
another half of Trump voters are, just being pragmatic about it. Like,
Pragmatic. Yeah.
I mean, again, the stock market shot up,
I
right?
know.
Like, from just a financial point of view, I
Yeah.
mean, who knows if that'll continue or whatever, but like things have been great
I mean, the
financially,
Houthis
you
came
know.
out and were like, "We're not going to bomb any. We're done. Our campaign is finished." Did you see that? The Houthis made a statement that they're no longer bombing in international waters because they finished. Like, that's a big deal. I mean, I'm not saying it's going to be perfect because he's not a perfect person and he flies by the seat of his pants, and I'm very worried about that. And also, Donald Trump loves Donald Trump, and so he's going to want a lot of glory for things, and I'm worried that he's going to pressure Israel. I don't know if you want to get to this soon, but
Yeah,
I
yeah,
could
let's
just
do
start
that. I mean,
now.
I have no idea
Like,
how long we've been talking
yeah, no,
for.
like
No.
I'm worried that he's going to just like jump in and start pressuring Israel to, make concessions that they've been trying not to make all along, and to do things that they haven't been willing to do, but he's going to pressure them to a point where they're not going to have a choice. That worries me. I want Israel to be in control of what's going on over there. I want the United States to support them. I want him to use his power right now to somehow get the hostages out and use whatever leverage he can, maybe to force Iran or whoever in the
I mean,
region.
Iran is freaking out a little bit. I actually
They're
had a bullet point. I
freaking
was I
out.
was looking at
Yeah.
the Iranian currency is down. The
Yeah.
Iranian stock
Yeah.
market is like showing signs
Yeah.
of crashing. Like
Yeah.
Iran
Good.
is freaking out.
I
So
mean,
I
I feel
think
bad for the people there, but yeah, I mean, it
no,
should
it needs to
happen.
happen. I mean that
Their
that
government needs to fall. Yeah.
yeah. I mean, listen, there's not a thing. I actually that's not true. Because I kept saying on other podcasts I don't know a single Persian Jew, who didn't vote for Trump. But then a good friend from college who's a Persian Jew, texted me and he said I voted for
Oh.
Harris. So I
Oh,
know
really?
one Persian Jew who who did not vote
I
for
mean,
Trump.
same with the most Israelis and most Russian
Um,
Jews and
but no,
most
but
Jews that come from communist countries or authoritarian countries. They are pro-Trump, which is interesting.
yeah, I told the group of I won't say who or what the situation was, but it was 10 liberal Jewish leaders on a call the
Mhm.
other day. Um, and they were all like literally like the world is ending. This was
Yeah.
yesterday morning. And I was talking about like, kind of these different groups in the Jewish community. And they were like getting upset. And then I said something, I'll probably regret this one day, but nothing's hurt me this far.
Yeah,
I was
it's fine.
like, guys, it's actually quite Ashkenormative to assume that like Jews are upset right now. They were not
That's
happy.
right. That's right.
But
But
it
it's
is. I
right.
mean,
It
like,
is.
if we're talking about the Israeli population or we're talking about the American Jewish population, Jews of color voted
Yeah.
for Trump in
Right.
huge numbers. I know that's crazy for people to think about, but Jews of
Right.
color probably voted for Trump at 90 to 10 odds in
I
terms
mean,
of if you think about Iraqi Jews and Syrian Jews and Persian Jews. And
of
so
course.
this
Of
whole
course.
this whole ethnic, racial way of thinking about things is crazy.
Yeah. It makes no
Now it doesn't.
sense. It doesn't make any sense. It's silly. It's ridiculous. If you think about it, one of the funniest things I read is that, the Orthodox Jewish community, the Amish, and the Muslim community. I mean, Dearborn, Michigan. He Donald Trump won Dearborn, Michigan, which
Yeah.
is shocking. I don't understand it.
It's shocking. Okay, so here's my theory. Okay, a lot of them are saying, I just listened to an interview with the mayor, and they're saying it's because Kamala was the genocide person, blah, blah,
Nah,
blah.
I don't believe that.
I think the Muslim community are just uncomfortable with social progressivism.
Right.
And they anyway, like the Muslim
That's
community
right.
is not
They're more
pro-abortion. They're
conservative.
not pro-gay marriage.
Right.
Trans, are you kidding me? For
Right.
the Muslim
Right.
community. So
Right.
I think it's, also there, probably it is the woman for the Muslim
That
community.
could
How
also
many
be
how
part.
many Muslim countries do we know that have
Yeah.
female leaders?
Yeah.
That's a laughable thing to
Yeah.
fathom. In Afghanistan, they can't even listen to women's voices. So I actually think with the Muslim community, it's a lot, it almost has nothing to do with Gaza. I think that's a convenient scapegoat. I think it really is
Such a
the
good
fact that
point.
she's a woman and social issues. That's sort of my theory that I'm running with. I think that if,
Do you think the Orthodox community didn't vote for her because they can't put her picture in the magazines, and it would have been it would have been too complicated?
oh my God, do you
Yeah.
remember? I mean, there's no way listeners know about this, but in 2016, I forgot what the magazine was. It was in Israel. It was some Haredi newspaper that during the debate, and just for listeners' background, if
Yeah.
don't know this at all, in the ultra-Orthodox community, in some newspapers, they don't publish any pictures of women in
Right.
anything, which actually leads to some really funny situations where you have these like children's
That's
books,
right.
but there's no drawings of
There's
women,
no
so it just
mom. I
looks
know.
like a gay Hasidic family.
There are
You have
ads
two
in these
dads, and
there are ads there too for like two
yeah,
men
yeah.
playing on
You
the
have like
floor with a kid, and it's like, wait,
exactly
what?
two men playing on the floor
Yeah.
with kids, and it's like you guys realize this just looks like two gay like Hasidic men, but it's
I
because
know.
yeah, yeah, it's really funny.
But I wanted to say Chabad does not do that, because the Rebbe was always very careful that there should be a picture of a boy and a girl in publications. I just want to name that.
Got it. No, I'm
That's
glad. I'm
other
glad.
communities. So just, yeah.
And Trump went to the OHEL. What was
I
it, a month?
know if Kamala would have gone, maybe that would have helped her, because
I
Trump did
actually
go.
think that it's funny because I actually remember the last time you were on the podcast must have been like a year and a half ago. You and your dad came on for an
Oh,
episode,
that's
and we
right.
and we talked about Chabad. And I've
Yeah.
actually sent around that episode to some people that were kind
Yeah.
of like asking me questions about Chabad. Um, Probably Chabad Nicks went for Trump at super high rates, and I wonder because Chabad is so spread out. I mean, I'm kind of curious about that influence, kind of trickling down in a
Yeah.
lot of different communities.
I wonder. I mean, the Chabad's in a very interesting position because most Chabad rabbis deal with communities that are liberal, right? Most of the shoals, the Chabad shoals are populated with, liberal Jews who come there. So I know for a fact, like my father's shoal is very split. I mean, it's definitely not uh too Trumpy, but there are people that voted for Trump, and there are a lot of people who would never vote for Trump, and he has to really maintain a very careful balance
Interesting.
of not talking about it too much, of not having people like there were people who came to Shoal with Trump yarmulkes, and like I know other people got really upset about it. Like it's a delicate balance for a Shoal, and I think reform
That's probably why they didn't vote for Harris because she doesn't wear,
needs a yarmulke. I
well,
know.
yeah, because if you're in the Orthodox community, girls don't wear yarmulkes. So, um,
I know, but it's interesting because the liberal Jewish communities, a lot of people are frustrated that they're too liberal and that there's no space for conservative Jews over
well,
there,
that's, my uncle is like, not a traditional Jew by any, like, maybe a couple times a year we'll do something
Yeah.
Jewish, and left his Reform shul a couple years ago and started going to an Orthodox shul, not
Mm.
because of religion, but because of
No, because
politics,
of politics. Yeah. I mean,
which is a
that's
very
what
interesting
happens.
switch. And again, I think also like, okay, Jews still voted for, Harris probably at
Yeah,
least
like
two to
by
one odds,
70.
probably 3 to 1 odds,
Yeah.
something in the 65 to
Yeah.
75%. But there is a switch going on. I mean,
Yeah.
it definitely dug into the
Yeah.
percentages a little bit. And I just
Definitely.
don't think it's reasonable for leaders of a Jewish institution to be overtly political one way or another. And this is,
Agree.
I think both on both sides.
I
Like I
agree.
think talking about Trump from the pulpit or Harris from the pulpit and explicitly, I think we could talk about policies and values.
Mm.
But I don't think, having a blanket statement like, this person or this party, we repudiate everything. Like talk about issues, get into abortion, talk about how Judaism fundamentally is more pro-choice than a lot of
Right.
Republican states. Like that's fine. That's like Jewish content, but don't say
Yeah.
like Republicans are beyond the pale of Jewish values because you're going to
Yeah.
alienate Jews. And also like, what does that mean, Jewish values? And I don't know.
Yeah.
I
I
get
mean,
very,
I'm a religious Jew, so I think people get annoyed when I say this, but my message to my students the last few weeks has been very consistent, and it's been we as a Jewish people know that we have a God and God runs the world, and we have to play our part and we show up and vote and do what we think is the best. But at the end of the day, like there's a whole plan going on that I don't understand. And I know people get frustrated when I say that because it's some people think it's patronizing or some people think it's, fantastical or whatever, but the reality is like we don't control the story. And so why should a 21-year-old student feel that the whole world is crashing down? We catastrophize everything to the kids today. And then
mm,
and then we wonder why they're depressed and have mental health issues. So when I say to them, guys, you do your thing and then you put your hands up and say it's not up to me. There's a plan, whether it's the universe, whether it's God, whether it's whatever, something, there's a bigger story than me and I'm just playing my little part here. And stop thinking that the whole world is coming to crash down on your head right now.
yeah,
I don't
I'll
know.
take issue with your theology, but we'll save that for another podcast
That's
debate.
fine.
I won't get mad at you, but no, but I do think we are sort of putting in a self-fulfilling prophecy of anxiety into young
Of
people.
course we
I mean, I
are.
see this. I have, there are people I know that have like little kids, like under
Yeah.
10. And, they'll be posting things on social media like, we had such a difficult talk with our child, our 8-year-old child about how our person didn't win and the big bad guys in the White House, but don't worry, it's going to be okay because we'll keep fighting. I'm like, your freaking 8-year-old wants crayons and an ice cream cone.
I know.
And like, what? And I think we kind of do the same thing for, okay, college students already, they have more of an intuition and they, have some,
Yeah.
obviously they're more developed. But if everybody I respected when I was 17 or 18 said, we're all screwed, the world is going to end,
Right.
like, I would have
Right.
taken that pretty seriously. And so,
It's
yeah, I think
true.
my message also has been like, okay, like, you know,
Right.
I'm not happy, but let's, the
Right.
world's still here.
Right.
We made
In
it two
fact, not
full
only is
days.
it here, then by many metrics, the world is better than it's ever been. I mean,
Yeah,
I don't know
yeah.
if you
Oh, for
ever read
sure. And
Steven Pinker's stuff, but
oh
like
yeah.
Steven Pinker is always out there banging on about this. Like we live in the best times in the history of the world. And I have to remind myself of this sometimes because, when we get bogged down with all the anti-Semitism and what's going on in Israel, I start catastrophizing as well, right? Because I'm scared and I'm nervous. And, tonight there was a terrible something going on in Amsterdam that seemed super scary. And, we're watching it unfold live on social media. And like it could feel, even though I'm sitting here in Long Beach, California, in my warm, cozy house, it could feel like I'm directly being attacked right now, And so the instinct that we have that the world is falling apart and that my life is directly impacted by all these bad things, it's a real feeling. But we have to take a deep breath and we have to understand that the world is actually, and especially here in America, especially where we live, we're the most privileged Jews that have ever lived probably in the history of mankind, maybe except for
Oh, not even
during
Jews. Anyone living in
I know, but
America.
I'm just saying
I
as
mean,
Jews for sure, like who lived
well, it's
better than
funny
us?
because the
Maybe
same
during
people,
King
I mean,
Solomon's times.
yes, there we go. Um, not if you were one, his
Not if you're a
900
woman.
wife. Well,
Right.
if you were maybe in his top 50 wives,
Yeah.
maybe once you
Not
once you got to,
470. Yeah, you
not
were
yeah, wife 470.
horrible.
That was for listeners that have no idea what we're talking about. Solomon had 1,000 wives.
Yeah.
I can imagine a lot of people being very confused at that point. Um,
Yeah. But yeah,
um,
I mean, we live in a good world. Like we're lucky. We're
Yeah,
lucky,
but
but it
this is
doesn't
also
always
like
feel
kind of
that
the
way.
paradox with, I feel like, progressives where they want to deride America endlessly and talk about how
Yeah.
America's terrible and blah blah blah. And yet also their immigration policy is so open border because they're like, they kind of imply the reality that's true right now, which is there are
Right.
tens, if not hundreds of millions of people right now trying to get into our country
Yeah.
for good
Wishing they
reason
could.
because they're
Yeah.
coming from awful places. There's probably billions of more that like just don't have the physical capacity to get anywhere near our southern border, but would love to come here. I mean, probably 95% of the world today, if you came to them and said,
Yeah.
here's
Do
an
you want to
American
move to
citizenship,
America?
you
Yeah.
want to come, they would say, of course. And so it's just crazy to me that people don't have that level of awareness. Now, again, it doesn't mean things are perfect here, of course. And,
Yeah.
we keep fighting to make things better. But,
Yeah.
one of the things, yeah, it just this lack of ability to accept progress, I think
Yeah,
is really,
it's sad. And one of the things that I do find a difference between Republicans and myself is in the immigration question because I believe in immigration. Like I want much more immigration. I think we should be having a lot more legal immigration. We should be letting way more people in. We should make it easier. But I don't want people coming across the border without being checked. It does scare me. I don't like the idea that people come in here illegally. We don't know who they are. We don't know where they are. We don't know why they're coming here. Call me paranoid, call me whatever, but
no, you're not, I mean,
that's the reality. I
I
mean,
texted
that
you
is the
before we
reality.
started when we were talking
Yeah.
about the Amsterdam thing, but like, look at Europe. I
Yeah.
mean,
Exactly.
Europe is basically broken. I mean,
Yeah. Yeah. It's the reality
there's
there.
there's such unchecked immigration, and
Yeah.
that immigration is leading to anti-Semitism, and you have,
Yeah.
millions of people from the Arab world coming in, which, okay, fine in
Yeah.
theory, but they don't become assimilated at all. And then Jews are not safe anywhere
Exactly.
in Europe now. You go to a synagogue anywhere in Europe and you're
Yeah.
basically going to an army base. I
Of
mean,
course. Yeah.
I had to spend, I told the story on the podcast, but for listeners that didn't listen to this, I was in Switzerland over the summer and I wanted to get a kosher dinner at the kosher restaurant. There's one kosher restaurant in Geneva,
Right.
and I was kind of looking like a little bit of like a schlep, that it's Yiddish for like,
Yeah.
I didn't look as polished as I do now. I was like hiking the whole day, and I just had a backpack, and I had a hat because I was too afraid to wear a kippah.
Yeah. Yeah.
As is also true in Europe, and I was
Yeah.
kind of drenched in sweat, and so I came up. I didn't have my passport on me, and it took me like 45 minutes to convince this Israeli guy that I wasn't going to go kill everyone. And I was like
Yeah.
speaking in Hebrew and I was,
Yeah.
telling him, I'm like, listen, I'm a rabbi. I know what the Parsha is. I know, but they were so scared.
Yeah.
Um, and
Yeah. We
so,
went to Rome last summer. Are you kidding? You cannot go into the Great Synagogue in Rome if you don't make plans beforehand. You have to send in your
yeah.
passport. They have to check it. I mean, it's the
And this is
reality.
not far. And for people that are not aware of this conversation, we're not talking about right wing anti Semitism in Europe, which, of course,
No, no,
Europe
no.
has a
Right.
history. This is Islamist
Anti-Semitic.
anti-Semitism
Yeah.
of people on
Yeah,
the
so
street.
that scares me here. I don't want to import that here,
Yeah.
but I do want more immigration. And I think that I heard, I don't know if this is true, so don't like, I'm not a policy expert, but I heard that there's a plan.
AI quote this.
Yeah,
I don't know. I don't know. I don't
not a
have those
policy expert. No, but somebody said that Trump has some kind of plan to give college graduates a green card, an automatic green card. Like if you graduate college here, you get an automatic green card. I love programs like that. We should have way more programs like that. We should encourage smart, not only educated, hardworking people that want to come here. We should have more immigration. But it has to be done normally. Like it's common sense. I mean, this doesn't seem like a hard, like it just, I don't know. It doesn't seem like a hard issue to get right. I don't know why the government can't seem to do it.
Yeah, what's the David Frum line? If liberals won't enforce borders, fascists will. What's
Yeah,
the
exactly.
which I
Exactly.
think is sadly true.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, Europe is going to end up electing far right governments all
Oh, for
across
sure.
now. And the Jews are going to pay a price for that, you know? So we
Well,
can't,
the Jews are
we
going to be
pay a
gone from
price.
Europe. I mean,
Well, right. Correct.
I'm still, I mean, again, I say this now, I'm sure, I'm shocked that there are Jews still living in Europe. Okay, I'll
Yeah.
say that. But then, of course, there's some guy sitting in like Efrat right now, shocked that there are
Yes.
Jews still living in California.
It's true. It's
It's
true.
all
That is
it's
true.
all relative.
It's interesting because I'm doing like
Mhm.
you have a master's in ancient Jewish history, right? Is that what your master's degree is in?
I kind of change the topic depending on.
Oh,
I mean, it's in Jewish history, but
okay. I didn't
I'm
know.
you know me. I'm like super ADHD,
Yeah.
so I
Yeah.
had like 4 or 5 focuses. One of them was ancient Jewish history, one Talmud, one American Judaism. So
Yeah, okay.
I
I'm
just
also kind of moving
yeah, yeah.
around and not sure what I'm doing, but I've been taking a lot of classes on ancient Jewish history. And when you talk about the diaspora and the Jews who were living in Judea and sort of how they interacted with each other and some of the like correspondences and reading through some of the texts, it's really relevant today because they were kind of dealing with the same thing where it's like there's a community in Israel, there's a community outside of Israel. Each community has their own sort of, priorities and needs and
Mhm.
concerns and worries. And so, and just reading those it's been really fascinating to
It's
me.
interesting. Yeah, the most
Yeah.
interesting source on this. So, just for listeners that have not taken master's classes in ancient Jewish history, there were actually a couple times in Jewish history where the Jewish world was split between Israel and
Yeah.
Babylonia. But the Talmud was one of those times. So there was a Jerusalem Talmud and a Babylonian Talmud, and they were kind of both fighting for who was supremacy in terms of the Jewish
Yeah.
world, in terms of who's going to make the rules, who's going to establish the laws and the culture. And the Babylonian Talmud ended up winning out, which is why, that's the Talmud people study. But there's a famous source um, that says, um, Bavel is the new Zion.
Mhm.
And then some rabbi, they quote some verse, which I'm forgetting, but it
Yeah.
says, why? It says, because that is where the Jews mitsuyanim sham, right? Like mitsuyan in Hebrew means, just for listeners, it
Excellent.
means like incredible or great.
Right.
And that's where the Jews are great. And so it's a very interesting, play on words of like, okay, in the 5th century, there are these Babylonian rabbis writing that actually like Zion is Babylonia. And that's it's very interesting with
Yeah.
like America Israel vibes now of like, is
Yeah.
America the sort of home for the Jewish people? Is Israel the home for the Jewish people? And it's like
Right.
they
Right.
kind of both are. And I think
Yeah.
that's
Yeah. I mean, I know people in Israel have a hard time believing that we feel like we're at home here, but I think a lot of American Jews do. And we've been here now I mean, I'm like, my family is very new to America, but like many
you guys got
American
here what,
Jews,
like 2 weeks ago
yeah, we just arrived
from Poland, right?
just came to Ellis
From the
Island.
shuttle.
I'm actually
You
going to
left.
Poland in 2 days, which is hilarious. I
Oh,
mean, yeah,
okay.
I'm going to Poland for the first time. But a lot of American Jews have, we're fifth, sixth generations here already.
Mhm.
So it is home for a lot of American Jewish families. And I think this year was tough. I think it was a really, really tough year for American Jews, even those who want to kind of pretend they don't,
Mhm.
it doesn't affect
But
them.
can I say something that's sort of always in the back of my head that I've never actually verbalized,
Yeah, go for it.
publicly? It was more dangerous to be a Jew in Israel this past year
Yes,
than in America.
correct. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, okay, obviously something is scarier when you don't have a government and an army protecting you, but like still 1 to 1,
Yeah.
no matter how much, because I have a lot of people in Israel that are, that are kind of on the why aren't American Jews all moving here now? Don't they know America's not safe?
I know.
And part of me is like, I see where they're coming from. And then part of me is like, it's way safer to be in Orange County or Long Beach than it is in Tel Aviv right now. I mean,
Yeah.
God forbid anything happens either of those places. So that's also a little bit, of an interesting
Yeah.
thing to throw in the mix there.
No, that's true. I think here it's more this story we've told ourselves about assimilation and, blending in and sort of the security has just kind of been upended in the last year. And I think people are feeling very unsafe in that way. You're right. It's not physical. Maybe it's not fit. We don't feel physically unsafe. I try to tell my students that there's a difference between being physically unsafe and uncomfortable. I think maybe what we're feeling here in America is more of an uncomfortable feeling of,
No,
the
it's
the
definitely less
reality.
safe. Like I think also
Yeah,
less physically safe,
yeah,
but
but
Israel's
not
way
it's
less physically
right.
safe.
I know. Have you been to Israel since October 7th?
Yeah, twice. I
Yeah.
was
Oh,
in.
same. I was
Yeah.
there twice also. Yeah. And it's weird because I was scared. Like there were
Yeah.
times that I was scared when I was in Israel. And I'm going next week. After Poland, I'm going straight to Israel. And so I'm nervous. I mean, I don't want Iranian missiles like flying over my head or even Hamas rockets or whatever. Um, but there's just a sense of safety there that it's just different, because I don't know. You're in Israel. I can't explain
No,
it.
there is a feeling of comfort. I
Hard
don't
to
know, safe.
articulate. Yeah,
For
comfort.
me, it
Yeah,
was
that's
comfort.
the
It's,
word. Yeah,
it's less,
yeah,
I mean, the way that I always think about it is here, people just don't know anything about Jews. So they don't
right,
understand who we are. They think we're
right.
just some weird offshoot of Christianity that rejects Jesus. Like there's just
Yeah,
no understanding
yeah,
of who Jews are. In
yeah.
Israel, you don't go around with like this assumption that everybody just has no idea who you are and just thinks you're a weirdo for wearing a kippah.
Right,
Like, and
right.
so that, even if it's not physical or anything like that, it's just,
Yeah,
it's,
yeah.
I don't know. It just seems like, it's nice for the first time ever to be a part of the majority, not a minority. Um,
It's
yeah.
unbelievable to feel that. I was in Israel with all my kids over Hanukkah. We decided to do a family trip. It was right after October 7th, and we were like, it was scary, and people thought we were nuts. Even people in my own family were like, "What are you doing?" But I felt like I really wanted to be there, and I wanted to take my kids. And so we went for Hanukkah last year, and I was walking down Yafo towards Ben Yehuda with my four boys, and my son, who's 22, who traveled. He's been so many places around the world, traveled with friends or for yeshiva, and all over Europe and Central America, South America. Like he's been a lot of places. And as we were walking, he turned to me and he said, "It's just so nice to be here. I feel at home. Like there's nowhere else in the world that I feel at home." And that's what he kept saying to me. He's like, "I could stop and get food. I could, st- I, ever, he just, it dawned on him in that moment, like all the places he'd been were never home. And this is his place." And I was like, I almost started crying, and I don't get that emotional that often, but I was like, I took a deep breath and I started thinking about our family, my ancestors, thinking like that my
Mhm.
grandparents, right, who were Holocaust survivors, to think that their great grandson would be walking down the street in Jerusalem, and there's 50 restaurants between where we were standing and 2 blocks away that were all Mahadran, and there were Jews of all types walking down the street, and it was 1 o'clock in the morning on a Saturday night. I mean, this is the dream of Israel is just I'm never going to get tired of thinking about it or talking about it. I'm just never going to. It's unreal.
No, total. I
Even
mean,
after
I still
October
get
7th.
like, teary eyed when I hear Hatikva even.
I
I mean,
know.
just, the meaning of that story. So no,
Wait,
I
when
mean,
were we in Israel together? I have no sense of time. When was that?
we were in Israel together twice, no? Because we did the Hartman together, and then we also stopped a
Oh,
birthright trip.
well, our birthright trip. That's what I was thinking about. When was that? Was that 2 years ago? Yeah,
That was
it was
two
two
years ago.
years ago. It was two
Yeah. It
years ago because it was post COVID. It
was post-COVID,
was
pre-October
post
7th.
COVID. Yeah,
That's
yeah. So it was
that's
about two
that's just
years
how I
ago.
think about the world. It's
I know.
pre-COVID, post-COVID,
I know.
post-October 7th.
It's been quite a 5 years. I mean,
Has
it's
been quite a
it's
5 years.
especially
What are
working
your
at Hillel. I mean,
Yeah, being on campus is yeah, it has not been a dull
I
moment to be
know.
on a college campus. That's what I've.
No, it has
It's part
not.
of the fun also, and compared to most people at Hillel, we've stuck around a lot longer than it seems like the average is. So maybe it's good that we're talking about
That's
these things when everyone else seems to be too afraid to
oh
talk about any
God.
issues.
I know. I
Um,
apologize to anyone who's offended for anything I said. Yeah, go on.
well, I was thinking like my whole life, like whatever group I was in, I've always like done things that were very like scandalous or controversial. So like
Yeah.
when I was back in the Orthodox community, like I wrote so many blog posts and op-eds like
Yeah.
crapping on the Orthodox community. And even to the point where I read some of them now and I'm like, I was such an asshole. What was I doing? But like, because you were so in that community, I would just get so
Yeah.
frustrated. And
Yeah.
now I haven't written anything or said anything derogatory about the Orthodox community in, you know,
Yeah.
7 years. And now all my attacks are the liberal Jewish community, but it's because I'm in that community now. So I think it's just always been my
Well, it's
personality.
easier. Also, it's important, and it's really important for people within their own communities to critique their communities, because it's easy for me to sit here and lob, insults at the liberal Jewish world, right? It's so easy for me to do that. It's much harder for me to sit here and be like, let's look at my own community and think about where we're making big mistakes and where we can improve. And that's why I always say, even in like the Hillel Chabad context, it's like, let's learn from each other. There's a lot that each side could teach each other. And instead of, but that, I mean, whatever, what are we, Pollyanna, pie in the sky? Like that's just, it's easy in life to, it's more fun, right, to critique the other side. But the real good work is when you critique your own community and help them see how they can improve. I think that's so important. But no one.
Totally. Okay. So what are your predictions? Let's do last two
Oh
minutes
boy.
for this
With this
upcoming year for
administration.
Jews.
Oh, for
Administration for
Jews.
Jews, for Israel. You can take it however you want.
I mean, what I really hope, I don't know if this will happen. What I hope is that Donald Trump is going to see a victory in the Middle East as like a big mark for him, something that he could like have forever, a legacy forever, that he solved the Middle East, Middle East conflict, and like something major happens, whether it's, the Arab world coming together and telling Hamas and Hezbollah and Iran to stop, or, I mean, that's my dream. I don't know, but that's what I'm hoping. I
Rainier
really
came to
am.
say hi.
He's so cute.
Um,
So cute.
I was
What
talking to
about you?
somebody in my family. I won't name who because they said not to tell anyone they voted for Trump, but not somebody who is obviously voting for Trump. Why they
Yeah.
voted for Trump. And they said with Harris, they knew exactly what would happen with Israel. With Trump, they have no idea. And
Right.
their whole life, for the last 60 years, it's been I know what's gonna happen and nothing will get done. So why not like
Yeah.
roll the dice?
Try something. Yeah.
So I am worried about a Trump administration with Israel. I think, he doesn't have Israel's best interests. I think, if Qatar or Iran offered him some, golf course, he'd probably
Yeah.
take it and give up all morals. I'm afraid
Well,
of the America first philosophy.
oh,
That all
terrible.
said, I am,
Terrible.
cautiously optimistic
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
something like you just said, and for finally,
Yeah.
Israel to actually, fulfill, what Herzl's dream of being just assimilating into the nation of countries and
That's right.
not being in the front
We'll be
page.
able to tell, I think, in a few I mean, in the next 2 months, we'll know, because we'll know by the people he chooses to have around him. If
Mhm.
he's going to pick people who are smart and have Israel's best interests, then I think we're in good shape.
Yeah.
If not, and he's going to go like the Tucker Carlson direction or whatever, I mean, then I'm very scared, and I don't know. I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen. Every day, I literally on Tuesday morning said to everyone, guys, prepare. I wrote it in our family chat. I'm like, I want everyone to just know that Kamala Harris is going to win today. That's what I said. I'm like, I was convinced she was going to win. I had no doubt in my mind. So I'm not the person to make predictions because I don't know. And not only did he win, he like won big. So
Yeah.
I don't know.
Bigly, to use his
Bigly.
word from a
He's bigly popular and
bigly.
everyone shifted in that direction, not just like certain populations, like it's crazy. I don't know.
Yeah, my last theory about this, and then I'll let
Yeah,
listeners, I mean, if they're still listening until now, they probably
I know.
already this. The ones who shut this off after 3 minutes, I'll be able to check in the metrics, and then, I'll
You'll
know we
know.
shouldn't do this again. I'll go back to my normally scheduled academics and
I'm
politicians.
sorry. I know.
No, 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 this is good. This is a lot more fun. This is literally the phone call we would have had, if if we didn't record this. Um,
It's so true.
is
So true.
that a lot of institutions are broken, right? Like, we saw that with COVID, the health,
Yeah.
apparatus, the borders broken, the schooling system, education system is broken, financial system is broken. But because most of them skew liberal, liberals are pretending like everything's fine, whereas
Yeah.
Republicans are super anti-institution to the point where they're almost going too far and want to destroy it. But we need
Yeah.
some middle position of like,
Right.
okay, institution good, but fix it.
Fix
Not,
it. Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
but now we were sort of given a choice between illusion that everything is perfect or destroy everything. And I
Yeah.
think a lot of people now kind of went with the destroy everything. Who knows if that's a good idea?
It's
I'm not
very a
convinced,
bit nihilist. Yeah.
but it
Yeah.
is, well, not even nihilist, meaning like, you know, okay, I know a lot of people who voted, a lot of my friends, this will be the last thing, this might take us on a whole different tangent, but have become very into this sort of like alternative health spaces,
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
the idea that processed foods is what's killing
Yeah.
us, and
Yeah.
endocrine disruptors, and the fact that the CDC never talked about like people going on
Yeah.
diets and running. It was all just the vaccine's going to save everyone. The
Right.
vaccine's going to save everyone. And so RFK's policy of Make America Healthy Again and gutting the FDA and the pharmaceutical industry seems very tantalizing. Now, there's obviously some middle ground that's necessary between
Right.
the FDA is perfect because they're not perfect. They don't talk about health. I was looking up different baby formulas the other day. Most baby formulas in America, the first ingredient is corn syrup. Like,
Ugh,
that's
that's
crazy.
terrible.
It's terrible, right?
Oh
That
my
should be
God.
illegal.
Right.
And you look at the Europe ones, and the first ingredient is like, milk or some, milk
Right.
product. And like you look at this and you're like, wow, how do we have this whole apparatus of like the food and pharmaceutical industry and all these things? I'm very passionate about this. This is my, aside
Yeah.
from Judaism, health is probably my big thing. On the other hand, this probably doesn't mean, you don't fire all the entire FDA. You
Right.
just kind of like tinker. But I think a lot of people went with the like, okay, gut the institutions because the
Yeah.
other side's not even willing to be critical about them. So I think that's
Which is part of the problem. I mean, we scream about, I mean, this is very politically incorrect to say, and I'm not saying I agree with this, but you can't scream, don't tell us what to do with our bodies when you just forced everyone to get a vaccine. Like the same people, right? And I think there was a pushback against that too for some. I think there were people who voted against the Democrats for just that reason. Like you told us that, you don't come near me and don't tell me what to do with my body, but then force me to inject myself with something. Now, I got vaccinated. I think vaccines were good. I'm
some of my
not
best friends are vaccinated.
sometimes some of my best friends are vaccinated, but that's actually a very fair, I think like a fair argument for some people to make. Like that's hypocritical, right? In some ways. So there's a million reasons why this election went this way. And a lot of people have a number of reasons why. I do want to say last thing. I wrote in John Fetterman because I love him. And I think John Fetterman is one of the hidden tzaddikim, hidden righteous people of the world. And when he won, I thought it was insane because I'm like, this guy had a stroke and he's depressed and he's not normal and he could barely speak and he wears shorts and hoodies. And how is he going to be in the United States Senate? And he has turned out to be such a good friend to Israel and such a good friend to the Jewish people. And so we don't always know where our buddies are coming from. And I don't know, it gives me faith that somehow there are people in all different corners because he's a really, if you don't follow John Fetterman, you really should. He's a great guy. So I just wanted to give John Fetterman a shout out.
All
And
right,
he's
so
very
more
liberal.
he is great. I really like John Fetterman. Perfect note to end this on. We need more John Fettermans.
Exactly.
Then the country would be saved.
Maybe
Thank
we
you
need
for
more
chatting.
Congress people to have strokes and then they'll understand. They'll see the light like he did, I
Oh, there
guess.
we go.
Maybe cut that. No, I'm just kidding.
All right. Well,
Thank
this was
you.
fun.
Thanks for having me on.